Good evening, and welcome to our Real Talk lecture series. We're glad to be today here with our illustrious panel, and they will introduce themselves in just a few seconds. I'd like to first start by thanking Mr. Michael Hill of Kennedy High School for allowing us to shoot this segment in this wonderful high school, none other than John F. Kennedy, where we're shooting in this beautiful TV studio. So today we're going to tackle the subject of why voting matters. We know that's a question that has flows throughout every household, every workplace, every conversation around politics. Why does voting matter? So before we get started with our questions, we're going to have a few questions we're going to ask our panelists to kind of drive our conversation. And then we've taken several questions from our studio audience today. We're going to interweave some of those questions to kind of also drive the conversation, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to ask our panel to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. We'll start up to our left with Mr. Jonathan.
Thanks, it's great to be here. I'm pleased to be at John F. Kennedy High School in Patterson. I'm Paul Trachtenberg. I actually retired this January from full-time law teaching at Rutgers Law School in Newark, where I managed to teach for only about 46 years. I've continued, I've continued to work on the projects that really matter to me, which have to do with improving urban education in New Jersey and elsewhere. And I just want to say one personal thing which sort of explains why I've spent close to 50 years doing that. I graduated from Weequahic High School in Newark at a time when it was a nationally ranked high school. What motivated me was the fact that the high school went through some really rough times, and I said, why couldn't the students there now get the kind of education and the educational benefits I got? And part of the answer was they didn't have enough money to do it. And so I really devoted 45 years to trying to equalize funding for urban school districts through the Abbott against Burke case.
Good evening. My name is Rosie Grant, and I'm the Executive Director of Patterson Education Fund. I come to this work at Patterson Education Fund as a parent and a member of the community. The organization's work is to stimulate community action for change so that Patterson Public Schools educate every child to a high standard. That keeps us busy. We believe in the children of Patterson. We're advocates for the children of Patterson. And we strive to put systemic changes to the system in place so that all of our kids benefit from these changes. A little bit about my background and how I got here. I was a young parent in Patterson working in corporate America when this job was announced. And it seemed like the right place to be because I always believed in public school. I knew my kids were going to be attending public schools, and it was just the right fit to be in a place where I could advocate for the schools and be engaged as the children grew up. One of my first parent meetings in Patterson Public Schools, I was asked what's expected for my child, and I said I want her and him, when he got there, to have an education that would allow them to compete globally. And people laughed. They laughed. They said, well, you better move. But that strengthened my determination, not only that they would get a good education, but that other children in Patterson would have that opportunity also. So with PEF, I continue to fight for equity for our kids. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ian Drake. I'm an associate professor of political science and law at Montclair State University. My interest is in legal history as well as, in particular, election law history, and that's my interest in regard to tonight's topic.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Clayton, and I am the pastor of St. Baptist Church here in Patterson, also president of Patterson NAACP. I am a lifelong Pattersonian. I have been in Patterson for 47 years, Patterson for 19 years. I'm a product of Patterson Public and Private Schools. I am, by virtue of my role as pastor and as president of NAACP, very concerned and committed about the educational system. As a product of it, I know that it does work and can work. And I want to see all my children have the ability to be educated and prepared for world. Well, she said that all our children can be prepared for global work, whatever that work might be.
All right, thank you. As you see, we have a great panel this evening, and I'm looking forward to some great conversation. Everything has a beginning. And so I'd like to have the panel talk a little bit about, let's go back to some of the history around urban education. As we know, Brown versus Board of Education, it's a landmark ruling that kind of set a lot of things in place. What's the impact of that ruling? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, I think Brown against Board of Education had profound symbolic value in this country. It really represented a fundamental change of course for the country, a fundamentally different way to think about things. On the other hand, unfortunately in New Jersey, Brown has not really taken hold. It was mainly a case about Southern segregation. And in New Jersey, we're in the strange position of having the strongest state law in the country that requires desegregation of the schools, and one of the worst records of segregation on the ground. It's a topic I continue to try to work on. It's something we all should both be aware of and commit ourselves to do something about, as organizations like the NAACP and the Legal Defense Fund have done over decades.
I think Brown was extremely influential. The history of it is interesting in terms of how the country reacted. Brown was actually several cases put together, a consolidated group of cases, not all of which were from the South. The cases dealt with about 5 different districts, one from Kansas, and so when the Supreme Court in 1954 declared separate but equal inherently unconstitutional, there was some uproar, but not a lot. What really spiked a reaction was in 1955, with what's often referred to as Brown 2, when the court had asked the parties to come back and talk about what kind of remedies, what kind of reaction courts could take when faced with desegregation questions. And the court famously said, and the most famous line from that case is, that federal courts will have to move with all deliberate speed, which in common parlance might sound like you got to do it quickly, but in fact a lot of the federal courts, the judges realized that they could do it on their own timetable. And that was a cue to a lot of local school districts throughout the country that they could resist in some fashion. This is where you got the famous massive resistance. And so there were a lot of different actions that school districts took. And it was interesting to know that 10 years later, 1965, only 2% of all schools were integrated in any meaningful sense of integration. And so it was, for about a decade, a pretty successful effort to massively resist. And so Brown, I think, helped lead to it was a catalyst for the civil rights movement, not just in education, but in other areas, voting rights as well, integration of public accommodations. In fact, as the court started, the Supreme Court started to hear subsequent cases to Brown, they would just cite Brown as their holding. In integrating pools, other types of restaurants and so forth. And this is before the Civil Rights Act of '64 was really starting to be implemented on its own. And so the court used Brown, but also there was a great deal of reaction against it. And I think that reaction of massive resistance, and there's a book that a historian named Michael Klarman has written that I think effectively charts the history of resistance, but then there was another reaction after Birmingham in '63 and later Selma in '65, when television broadcasts nationwide showed people how virulently resistance was going to be met with police force, that started to catalyze the movement to pass the '64 Civil Rights Act and the '65 Voting Rights Act. And so Brown, I think, had tentacles that went out that weren't immediately obvious, that really helped move the civil rights movement forward in a way that wasn't really anticipated even by the justices back in the 50s.
Interesting. Now, let's fast forward. I mean, separate but equal. Many would say that due to many factors, we're slipping back into a state of separate but equal. I mean, how impactful is Brown versus Board of Education, all that work was done back in those years? How impactful is it today? Are we slipping back into another segregated state? I mean,
Well, without getting too much into the legal weeds, I have to say that the problems created by the way the federal courts interpreted Brown against Board of Education really made it a regional decision in terms of the desegregation of the schools. Because the federal courts did two things. One, they drew a sharp distinction between what's called de jure segregation, segregation by formal law, and de facto segregation, which occurs through residential patterns and neighborhood segregation. And the second thing they did was to refuse to reach across school district lines and create regional remedies. And so that really made Brown a primarily southern decision with limited application in the north. Huge symbolic importance, but not much real practical implication. And I think the New Jersey courts deserve a shout out because in both those respects, they interpreted the state constitution, which incidentally in New Jersey, there is a specific state constitutional provision that bars segregation in the schools. And in interpreting that provision, the state court said, de facto segregation is just as bad for kids as de jure segregation, so we're going to erase that distinction. They also said school district lines shouldn't bar the integration of schools, and so they struck down that line, which led me to say a moment ago that we have the strongest state law in the country. Unfortunately, we've paid lip service to it and haven't actually implemented it. We have a dreadful situation of segregation in our schools. I did a report a couple of years ago. 26% of all the African American students in New Jersey attend schools that are called apartheid schools. That is, schools that have less than 1% white students. So we have strong law, we have very bad execution on the ground, and if you look at the demographics of any of our urban school districts, they are overwhelmingly populated by students of color, Black and increasingly Latino students. And unfortunately, they're also populated by a very large percentage of low-income students as measured by eligibility for reduced or free lunches. The state average, I was just looking at these numbers, is 37% of all our students are of low-income status. The number here in Patterson is 72%. So virtually double the state average for low-income students. The white population here is, I think, 4% as compared to the state average of 46%. So we still have a really big problem if what we want to do is aspire to the principle of Brown to really end segregation in schools.
Yeah. I'm glad that you pointed out the distinction between what is actually in the law and where we are with implementation of desegregation. Patterson cannot desegregate by itself just because of the nature of who it is that lives in Patterson. When you look at our demographics, and especially when you look at the student demographics, 90% of our students are children of color. So there's nowhere to put them for integration, for desegregation. So either we need strength in the law, or we need cooperation and collaboration with our neighbors in order to have Patterson schools reflect what the orders of Brown versus Board of Education. So I still say that we are separate, and unfortunately, with the underfunding of the School Funding Reform Act, we're also unequal. So we have not slipped back to separate but equal. We're separate and unequal, in my opinion.
So Rosie, before you hang up, now we're starting to lay some of the foundation, and we're going to get to the mantra of our show, why voting matters. But talk a little bit about, the impact here. You travel the state and you're heavily involved in what's happening in Patterson. What are some of the disparities that, some of the things that you're seeing that you would say we're not as equal, and that would, also lay the foundation as to why, parents and community stakeholders really need to come out and vote?
Okay. I'm going to start by some of the things that my children were able to take advantage of, because when we left the Patterson School District, we moved to Middlesex County in a suburban district. First of all, the way you're received as a parent is very different. And that's just at the very surface level. When you walk in the door, the way you're greeted in a more suburban and more affluent district is respectful. That was not the same experience that I had with all the schools I visited here at the time. Things may have changed over time. Students had access to lots of clubs, extracurricular activities, and they still do, that parents don't have to come out of their pockets for. In contrast, in Patterson, we've cut our arts and music program, which is not extracurricular, it's in the core curriculum content or whatever curriculum, whatever standards that we're moving towards, it's in New Jersey standards. We don't have a band, there's no high school band. We're talking about combining sports teams, of which we have few, because we can't afford to have teams in the two comprehensive school buildings. The disparities are great. We don't have all the working art rooms in schools. We don't have working science labs in all our schools. Our kids don't have the access to the technology that they have in other towns, not in the schools and not at home. Thankfully, we have something out of Abbott, full day preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds. So that does help our kids to gain some advantage as they enter school. But still, the economics of being in a low-income community affect student readiness when they get to the kindergarten or the preschool classroom. That's just a little snapshot of the disparities that we have when you look at a well-resourced school district compared to one that is struggling to make ends meet.
If we're going to say, I want you to add on to that.
I was going to say, again, I grew up in Patterson Public Schools in the 70s and 80s. And when I hear about the disparity that is now, I don't remember those, one, because we were not in technological society back then. So when I went to private high school, I arrived in high school with children from around the city and other places, neighbor towns. But I was prepared, I was as prepared, better prepared than most of those children were. Like in my public school, we had Latin and 7th and 8th grade students. We were exposed to all kinds of things. And I was like a big English person. Literature was very, very important to me. By the time I got to high school, I was done chasing that stuff. So when I got to high school, I was ready. I think that to the point that we gathered about tonight, to what Rosie has shared, the disparities that are part of what our city exists, our urban centers have to deal with now. Parent advocacy is the reason those things exist. Because for every issue that Rosie just mentioned, those that she did not mention, if parents were united and understood their right and responsibility, they would demand, and we would see those changes take place quickly. For some reason, our communities, and there are several Right, that's the reason that it exists. But parents are unaware of their right, their role, their responsibility. So they accept the disparities and negatives, also that's going on. We have a governor and political officials who don't care about it, so it goes on. But if we can, as a community, understand what our role is in demanding what belongs to us, those things will change very, very quickly.
I often talk to parents about one of the great local examples of advocacy is our teachers union.
Right.
The teachers union is about 4,000 teachers in the city at one time, and teachers unions, they mobilize teachers, they address issues, they lobby, but parents make up about 55,000 parents. We count 1.5 parents per student, and that's a large block. So I know one of the things we try to do at our office, and I know Rosie is doing the same thing, we try to help parents learn how to organize, how to advocate, how to utilize that block. So one of the main reasons, it's not a secret, it's probably the elephant in the room, is that one of the reasons for some of those curricular disparities and some of those extracurricular disparities is our funding. And even though somebody argued that back in the day, things can cost a lot of money, we know that times have changed, inflation, and what have you. Let's talk a little bit about the funding disparity. Let's talk a little bit about the funding formula and some of the history, if some can, so that parents can get an idea of the money that's supposed to be there and some of the money that's needed and some issues around that.
Yeah, let me just say on a personal note, I'm really saddened by what Rosie indicates as the status of funding and the status of programs, because the school funding litigation has been probably the central part of my professional life, and I think we succeeded truly beyond our fondest hope in generating more money when the Abbott decision was fully funded. And now to hear how it's dissipated under this gubernatorial administration is really sad, because there's a statute in effect but not fully funded, which would have situated a district like Patterson much better than it is. In fact, the law was adopted in 2008. You know how many times it's been fully funded? Once, in the first year. It has not been fully funded since 2010. And that's a disgrace. The statute built in the requirement of early childhood education for all at-risk students throughout the state. Not $1 was appropriated to fund that. So it's another case where we have held out great promises and simply haven't followed through on it. So, and we've gone back to court many times to try to enforce it, but to be quite honest, we live in a certain amount of uncertainty, fear that, we'll go back once too often and the court will say here, as courts have said in other states, enough, go to the legislature, don't bother us anymore. Our court has been remarkably diligent and responsible and even courageous in hanging in there for over 40 years in this effort, but we can't go every day to the court, and we should have a kind of self-executing system where you get the legislature to adopt a decent formula, it ought to get funded, but it's not, and that's why all of these cutbacks have been required.
Dr. Drake, maybe you can speak to this. A lot of people hear the fact that we have a funding formula, and although some folk may say it wasn't the best formula, but it was legislated, it was enacted. What loophole, if any, allows the governor to actually not fund the formula? Or what mechanism? I think some folk don't really understand some issue around that.
Well, I'll gladly concede my own ignorance on what loophole will really allow evasion of the law. I agree that it's important, whether it's the legislature that sets up a funding formula or whether the courts order it in terms of compliance. I think that it's fundamental for the funding formulas to be honored and to be fully, quote unquote, fully funded. I think, though, that I'm not trying to evade your question, but I will strike at what I think is an even more important issue, perhaps, which is correlation between funding and educational outcomes has been demonstrated to be actually rather weak. And I think that the achievement gap that we so want to bridge is not necessarily going to be effectively bridged by generous funding. In other words, even if it were fully funded, I think that we've seen in other areas of the country where we have per pupil spending that's in 13,000 plus, that the achievement gap is not being bridged. And it turns out that there are other factors that tend to be much more important in children's success, educational success, such as the character and quality of reading materials in the home, and the extent to which parents are involved in educating their children at home. Granted, teachers play a very important role, and I think that the quality of teachers in the classroom matters greatly. But it's a group of different variables that really impact children's education. Funding is important, and I agree being able to have band programs, arts and literature programs that supplement or are integral to an educational curriculum are extremely important. But I would note that the funding mechanisms are important, but they're not the sine qua non for educational success for students.
Can I weigh in just so the panel doesn't seem too comfortable with one another? I have to say the state's main argument in 40 years of litigation in the courts was money doesn't matter. That argument was rejected time after time based on hard evidence. So we're in some disagreement about it. Why is there an achievement gap nonetheless? How do we measure achievement gaps? We measure them based on standardized tests. What's the biggest driver of standardized test results? Socioeconomic status. We know in advance that unfortunately low-income kids are not in general going to score as well on standardized tests. So I think one area we need to look hard at is how do we measure the effectiveness of schools? So long as we're locked into standardized tests, I fear we're locked into achievement gaps. We can make some progress. Individual students can do well, as many of them do. But overall, everything reverts to the average, and socioeconomic status is the most powerful driver of standardized test results. I've spent time in other countries which have rejected standardized tests as accountability. They treat teachers as professionals, and therefore they get better quality people going into teaching. They impose responsibility for accountability on the classroom teacher who knows his or her students better than the Pearson company, which produces all the standardized tests. And by the way, it makes a lot of money from doing the tests, grading the tests, mentoring people about how to take the test, and the like. So I think there are really some fundamental issues we need to address, and if I can bring us back to the topic, the way to address them most effectively is by having really informed parents who participate in every way, including, importantly, by turning out to vote.
I know that you brought us back to the topic, but I'm going to take us away a little bit.
Just to show them on.
And again, this is live TV on Facebook.
We can't take it back. When a parent doesn't know where the next meal is coming from, that parent is not concerned with building a home library. When a parent is working 2 part-time jobs or 2 full-time jobs at minimum wage, that parent is not spending time reading to their child at home or building the child's vocabulary. When a parent barely made it out of high school or did not make it out of high school, that parent does not know where to go for the resources that the kids need in order to make them succeed. Money matters. It matters a whole lot. It matters inside the schools and it matters inside the homes. It's why there is a need for more supportive services for people who are in areas of concentrated poverty. And when you've been in the situation of having to decide about clothing, shelter, safety versus education, it's a tough choice for parents to have to make. They don't want to have to make that choice, but they know money matters. And I heard someone say the other day, it's generally folks who've never been there that will say money doesn't matter. I don't know the statistics, but I kind of know where our community is, and I feel as if every time someone tells us the money won't fix it, it's an excuse to not give us the resources that we need, because some things really do need dollars behind them.
Previous,
I heard what he said, and I hear what Dr. Drake has said, and I'm somewhere in the middle. Money doesn't matter. Our governor and our legislature have responsibility to fully fund us and make sure that the money is available. Our superintendent, school board have responsibility to make sure that money is deployed in places that will give our children a education. But I don't necessarily agree that it's all about the money, and it's because of the socioeconomic situation that we're in.
Not all about it, no.
Right, because in 1954, Black people were poor, Black people of color were poor, they were marginalized, but they had an expectation for their children, hope for their children, dreams for their children that we don't have now. Some of those reasons are because of choices that individuals have made or people have made across the board that have created a sense of hopelessness. So we have to figure out as a community how we deal with the bankrupted hope in our communities. And how we provide the money, because if you give money to people, if the money is available, people don't know their rights, and the avenues for they should use to empower their children, you still come with the same result. So it's like a two-edged sword. So money doesn't matter to some degree, money does matter, but when an individual or a community understands their role and responsibility, if there is no money, then we fight to get the money, and we get the money, and we fight for the money because we want the best for our children. If we get the money, then we'll make sure that the people who are responsible for managing the money don't mismanage it. And if they do, we advocate for them to go to jail or to be arrested or do whatever, because we want to make sure our children have the same possibilities in the future that children across the state have. So we're dealing with like living in two worlds. But again, I think it's our apathy and our hopelessness that promote both of those possibilities from helping us not help our children.
everybody. Some great views. Some would say that many of our problems and our issues are centered around our community's inability to make decisions on its own around school issues. And as you know, Patterson is one of the three major cities that has been under state takeover. And I guess we were talking to Dr. Frankenberg earlier. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary of being colonized, being under state control. And I joke, but we've been in a state where we've elected a school board, and myself being one of those elected board members some years ago, but yet we've had really technically no decision-making power as far as local legislation around school issues. Board has worked hard, has evolved, some things have happened. We're coming up on hopefully gaining local control very soon. If the winds blow the same way. What's the impact of a locally controlled school board? And also, with respect to many of the issues that you laid out today, what's the impact? Is it going to be helpful? Is it going to be something that we need folks to really come out and vote for, something we really can cheer for? What are your views on that?
I think the most important thing about this upcoming election on November 8th is that the folks that we put on this school board will be on the school board when we turn to local control, if this timetable is a realistic one. So we elect them, they'll serve for the next 2 or 3 years. In those 2 or 3 years, there's an expectation that Patterson will be returned to local control. The vote is so very important because these people who are elected board will truly then get full control of Patterson Public Schools. They will make all the decisions that affect our children. They will decide on the process of hiring a superintendent. It will be critical that we get the right person to lead the Patterson Public Schools, and this will be in the hands of our local school board. This is why the vote, not just the vote, but an informed vote. Know who your candidates are, know what they stand for, and make sure that they're the right people to lead this district back to local control. We have lots of things that have to be addressed over the next few years, but to me, that is the biggest concern as we talk about why we need parents and community members to go out and cast an educated vote this year.
I just want to add, I agree with Rosie entirely, but I just want to add a context. New Jersey elevates local control to a degree beyond almost any state.
That's why we're so segregated.
Right. It is why we're so segregated. We have over 600 school districts. Every charter school is its own school district. We have this proliferation of districts. People care so much about local control in New Jersey. We still have 13 school districts in New Jersey, which have their own boards that are called non-operating districts, that don't have a school or a classroom, but they exist as a separate district to send their kids to another district that actually has a school. So you have to understand, the 4 urban districts, including Patterson, that are under state operation and haven't had local control of their schools, in Patterson's case 25 years, Jersey City's case 27 years, Newark's case 21 years. This is an absolute aberration in a state that treasures local control so much, or says it does. And I very much hope that local control does really return to Patterson. But I have to say, being more familiar with Newark, it's been promised year after year after year and gets delayed. Hopefully it'll be different this time. And maybe if we get a more enlightened governor in the next election, the chances will be greater. But I think without some serious continuing pressure in every form, including from local communities, it may not happen.
It comes right back to doing that we're here. In order for something like that to happen, it underscores the importance of the vote in a connected community, a community that's concerned and informed, that makes demands based on the needs of the specific, whether it's students or city, what it deserves and what it needs. So come back to the importance of the vote again.
You know, there are parents and community stakeholders out there, and I guess we can kind of revert back to the subject matter here a little. You know, some folks would say, you know, my vote doesn't count, it doesn't matter. You know, earlier we talked about, you know, out of the 77,000 registered voters, we get about 10% or so vote come out and vote in our school board elections. You know, our school budget is upwards of $600 million or so. You know, we talked about, you know, to Reverend Clayton's point, you know, we need the money, but we need to manage the money. And some would say that being able to hire your own superintendent and have some more control over how that money is divvied up, if I may, is very important. So let's talk a little bit about, and let's talk to parents, you know, mainly about, you know, why your vote counts. You know, some folk feel that, you know, when we look at the presidential election, some folk are discussed on different, you know, aisles, and some folk are talking about sitting home. You know, what would you say to parents out there about, you know, the bucks that are packed behind this election and need to come out and vote?
As a parent of 19-year-old sons, as a native Pattersonian, and as a African-American man, I could not, one of the ages I wanted to get to was 18, so I could vote. That was because I was nurtured in the community and the family that taught me my history, helped me understand that voting was a tool that my grandparents and their parents had been robbed of. For most of my grandparents' life, they weren't able to vote. So when they got the right to vote, it was something they held dearly. So it strengthened me as a child, This is something that you must do, that you want to do, because it impacts your future. The way to change the world, one way to change the world, is through the vote. And again, I think that we have lost that in all the things that ail our society, particularly the African American community, and other minority communities. We don't understand the importance of that tool, and we have allowed some of the crazy that we see locally or in our state, or particularly this national election, make us think that it does not matter. It's unimportant. But clearly, if we look at how America is operating, with operating for the last 60 years, we have seen how the person who leads us, the person who are leaders in our political system, how they can very positively or negatively affect our lives. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, or you're independent, or whatever. But it's clear that whoever leads us determines the path that we go on as a city, as a state, or as a nation. So it's important for us to understand that my one vote, though it cannot decide or change things, but when people vote in an organized way for a cause, not just a person, we have changed it. I think someone mentioned earlier about what happened, the whole idea of what happened in Selma. The way when the media began to display what's going on in the South, people who organized the rights movement, they used those pictures of people being beaten, killed, and hold down as an impetus to change President Johnson primarily to make laws that were amenable to making things fair and equal for all people. And some of them, once they got the right to vote and they voted, that particular sheriff who was a racist, he never was reelected again. Our votes at the local place they count, and nationally and our state, they make a difference. But I think again, we have to reclaim the pride and honor of what voting represents, and understand that with that pride and honor and responsibility that every American must embrace, no matter who's running, and we have to select somebody and get behind the cause to make our country better.
I recall, and I agree with Reverend Clayton. We have a rich history that is something to celebrate, and there are many tears that is aligned in our history. I recall family stories where my grandfather in Canton, South Carolina, was turned away at the polls because he was told he had to recite the preamble, right? So he memorized it, right, because he couldn't read. So he got to the poll, and when they caught on that he was kind of reciting it from memory, they again pulled another piece of literature and told him that if he would read this, he could vote. And he tried to come back. This is the South in the country, they would come with rifles and have you. So, it's always been, I know in our families, the importance of voting is tied into sacrifice. Many people fall, die, and suffer, and some are still suffering, put their careers on hold, so that people that they didn't know that would come later in the future would have the right to vote. I know, Dr. you want to...
Well, I just wanted to make a kind of broadening point. I agree that voter turnout and voting is important in this community, but I think if we all, I think the people here shouldn't be too hard on themselves, because unfortunately voter turnout in school board elections across the state in every kind of district is abysmally low.
Okay.
And moreover, we have one of the worst voter turnout records in presidential elections of any developed country in the world. So there's something about the American psyche that doesn't value voting the way it ought to value it. And I think, so there's a very basic kind of reconstruction, if I can use that word, job to make people aware of the importance and the power of their voting. And, this is a good place to start.
People fought and died so that I could vote as a woman and as a person of color. So not only is it my right because of their struggle, but it's also my responsibility because of their struggle. I'm not a born citizen of the United States, I'm a naturalized citizen. And it took me a while to become a citizen because I was here as a legal resident. I worked, I paid my taxes, and as a very young person, 19, 20, I was going, well, why why should I become a citizen? You know, I pay my taxes, I do my civic duty, I stay above the law, and I don't want to do jury duty. So at that point in my mind, that would have been the only difference, so not something I wanted. It was when I became a parent that I saw the value in becoming a citizen of the United States, because I needed to have a voice for my children, and I could not have a legitimate voice unless I was casting a vote. And because I had that privilege and that right as a citizen, that's what drove me, so that I could be an advocate for my children. So I take it seriously, and I hope that other people who have that right and privilege, the folks who were born here and the ones who are naturalized, will also take it seriously, because every vote does matter. And you know I'm here about schools while we're here about voting, but I heard Assemblyman Sumter say yesterday, I want to give credit, vote from the bottom up. Now that the school board election is in November, even when people do turn out, given our low voter turnout rates, even when they do turn out, they don't necessarily vote in the school board election because it's tucked away down at the bottom.
Right.
And people forget, or they overlook it, or they haven't done their homework. So if there's a chance that you might forget when you go in there and when you talk to your friends and families, remind them to vote from the bottom up so that there's no way that that school board vote will get overlooked.
So if I assume we've convinced everyone that will view this video and goes out on Facebook to go and vote, give us some tips on now how do you become that educated voter? What are some things, some activities that you can do, some best practices to kind of, and this is a question coming from our audience, you know, how can we make ourselves aware of, you know, who's the best candidate, you know, how to look at credentials, you know, what matters, and how do you teach that to your family?
I think you need to know what concerns you have as an individual about your city, your community, or in this case, the school board. What are the issues that concern you about the schools or about your city? Go to candidates forums, read up on the candidates, know their platform, know what they're talking about, and see whose views line up with yours that you can, whatever election to promote what you think is best for your city or your school, whatever the issue is. But you have to be informed first. So you have to know what concerns you, and then select the candidates or support candidates whose issues reflect what your concerns are. And that causes whatever side you're on, whatever, it's not issues.
I agree that being informed is extremely important. In fact, it's more important than the participation rate. People can vote with their feet by not voting. That's a choice in and of itself if they don't feel like they have good options. And certainly, if you have no local control by the school board, that's a disincentive for voting in a local board election. But certainly, there are a variety of outlets, especially if you have access to the web. There are all kinds of local, state, and national websites that specialize in covering the varieties of issues. Not always school boards, they're not as frequently covered, but certainly local issues covered in the local media. And of course, there are all kinds of low-cost or free newspapers that are available that make it part of their beat to cover local elections. And often people are late deciders. People have busy lives and they don't pay attention to politics, understandably so, until those last few days before the election. It's important, I think, to try to pay attention sooner so you can have more time to think and deliberate. And I would urge people to do it, weeks before the election rather than just a few days before.
And I would put in a pitch for pushing the timetable way back. I think being an informed voter is not just doing a couple of weeks or a couple of days before an election, whether it's school board or presidential election. I think you have to inform yourself about the issues. I don't know whether there's anything in Patterson that's the equivalent. There's a program run and work by the Abbott Leadership Institute, which is really an effort to inform parents broadly about education, what are the issues, what are the options available, how should you think about improving education for your own children and for other children. So I would argue for a much broader and deeper view. I understand people who are working 2 jobs may not have the luxury of attending a course, but I think for me the optimum is really a truly educated citizenry, which is not simply educated around the election, but on an ongoing basis.
We start thinking about the elections early in the year, and sometime in May or June, we start announcing to people that if you're interested in voting, here's the deadline for it, not in voting, but in running for election. Here's the deadline by when you have to put your petition in. We announce when the petitions are ready so that people can go get them and go out and get their signatures and get them in by the deadline. Patterson Education Fund prints an educated guide to the school board election, which I brought today. Many of you are holding them in your hands, where we get the candidates to answer a series of questions and share it with the community so that you have the information. That's on our website. And then we also do a candidates night where people are invited to come out to this very space and meet the candidates and listen to them answer some more questions about the issues that are of concern regarding education in Patterson. And that is on, the Patterson Public School is streaming that right now. You can find it on our website, which I'll give you the address. It's patterson-education.org. Or you can see it on the Education Access Channel, Channel 76, and hear the candidates. It's running almost daily, I forget what days, but almost daily until the election at 12:30 and 7:30. Take the opportunity to learn about what the issues are. By the same token, there are other people that are giving lots of information on the presidential candidates and the questions that will be on the ballot. Those are going to affect us as well, and they're going to affect our kids. So it's important that everybody take the time to be informed about what the issues are, so that there are no regrets. Well, there may be regrets, but so that you don't regret not going to the poll, because your vote does matter. And it gives you credibility. When there's something going on that is not the way you think it should be, and you want to hold your elected representatives accountable, it gives you credibility to say, hey, I voted for you. You are my representative, and I cast a vote, and here's an issue of concern that I want you to address on behalf of our children, our community, whatever the case may be.
So without getting me fired, you know we have a presidential election coming up too also, right? And many folk are on both sides of the aisle with respect to who is the best for the country. But many folk may not think about how a presidential election may affect or impact local school boards or education locally. How would you encourage, or why would you encourage folks to come out and make sure you vote for this presidential election for the right candidate? And how do you think that's going to impact education?
It was the feds that brought us No Child Left Behind. It was the feds that gave us the waivers that brought some things to Patterson that we were not appreciative of and that we thought did not help our community. It's the federal government that sets in place the education standards for the entire country, which then has some trickle-down effect. We have a lot of federal monies coming to us that are tied to these things. So who we put in as president and who becomes education, is it commissioner? The Secretary of Education is very important. So that's why it's really important that you go out and vote. And it's not, in this case, it's not only education. It's where I sit right now, but it's everything is hanging on this election. It's important, especially if you're among the Blacks or the Latinos, that you go out and place your vote.
I can say deal with what Rosie said because, again, the president and his appointees in terms of education, in terms of the Secretary of Education, They determine the educational agenda for our country, and that's determination, it's determined the dollars, where the money goes, to whom it goes, and why it goes. So it's important for us to work to have a leader who has compassion and concern for the education of all Americans, or the healthcare of all Americans. Remember, each other affects America. So the leader, they direct the flow of resources and opportunities that affect communities, and urban community like Patterson, that has so many needs. We need a president who has compassion for urban needs and has an urban agenda to help revitalize urban centers and make them better.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding too much like a lawyer and law professor, let me say I think one of the issues of the highest importance that's at stake with this election is the Supreme Court. It's the Supreme Court that gave us President's Board of Education. It's also the Supreme Court that gave us Citizens United with all kinds of private money going into the electoral process. So who's on the court and what decisions the court makes is going to shape our lives long beyond a presidential term of whoever's in.
A disclaimer, when I say the blacks and the Latinos, I put that in quotes.
So there you have it. This electoral season is a very important one. And I think you've heard from our panelists that it's not an event that you need to sit home and watch on TV. You need to participate. There's a lot at stake. Sometimes I tell parents, you need to, ask your children every now and then, what do you want to do? What do you dream? What do you want to be when you grow up? And sometimes your children will say, I don't know. Sometimes your children, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a business person. I want to be successful. And so, think about, will that happen with the current, or with your leaders that are trying to vie to be, leaders of the government, the United States, state of New Jersey, and your school board. It's a lot at stake. Your child's hopes and dreams, your family future, can weigh on a little thing like walking down to a polling site and casting a vote for the best person for the job. I want to end our panel discussion by giving our folk an opportunity to give us one last rah-rah and tell our folk out there, why they need to get out and vote, why voting matters. Dr. Start with you.
Well, I think I made my main point, which is the critical importance of putting in place somebody who will nominate and hopefully get confirmed, which is a separate issue, Supreme Court justices who will make decisions that will support education, that will support children, that will support people of color, that will deal with income inequalities in the country. We have huge challenges in the country, and for better or worse, the U.S. Supreme Court has been playing an enormously important role. Look, the Brown decisions from 1954, we started the conversation here in 2016 by referring to that decision. So what the court does will have lasting significance for our children and our grandchildren and beyond.
So as a point of information, the next president will have the opportunity to appoint, I believe, possibly 3.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know.
Who steps down?
Right. So to your point, major impact.
I truly believe that every vote counts. It certainly counts in our local election because one vote can make the difference. It's a majority vote, clean majority vote in the school board election. So one vote can make the difference in who takes a seat on our school board. As we move up, all the same reasons for the Supreme Court, for health care, for education, for services for senior. It's very important that as many people that have the opportunity to vote take advantage of that opportunity, because I truly believe that the future of this country hangs on the outcome of the presidential election.
Well, we're one of the oldest democracies in the world, and so there should be a strong cultural tradition that encourages voting. Alas, it comes in waves, and the most the highest participation rate in American history in terms of voting was really in the 19th century. That's when people really came out to vote. And it seems that one of the reasons that they did was because they had little else to distract them. Voting was a social endeavor. It was something where people came together, and it was a time where you would actually socialize with neighbors. Unfortunately, that's not true, especially with mail-in voting and all of the various ways that we can essentially avoid participating on Election Day. But that's pining for the past. In terms of today and in the future, I agree with what the other panelists have said in terms of the filter-down effect at the national level. Case in chief is the 2000 election. Only a few hundred votes in Florida decided who the presidency was. Could have been Al Gore, or it could have been George Bush, and American history arguably would have been quite different over the last decade and a half. And so the importance of voting is underlined at the national level, yes, but also at the state and local levels. I think that it's extremely important, again, to reiterate, being well-informed before going out to vote is extremely important. So I encourage everyone to make the effort and to honor that tradition that we have in the U.S. of civic participation. We're one of the few nations in the world where the elections are run pretty well, and you can really count, you can depend on your vote actually counting and being counted.
Dr. Drake said a little bit, but I was going to say, I think that pre-elections, presidential election point for me show how America was changed by voting. In 1960, John Kennedy was elected by a very small majority. But his election, which his assassination allowed for Lyndon Johnson to become president, changed across America for African Americans and other minorities. 2000, George Bush was elected or selected to become president. That changed the course of America for 8 years. Barack Obama was elected in 2008, and that has, depending on who you are, changed the course of America and help Americans. So we see how every election is important, they all count, and we have to see ourselves as investors in the change in America that we want to see.
So I'm going to ask you to extend that round of applause and give our panelists a hearty Patterson round of applause, and thank you. So look for us on Facebook, look for the segment on Patterson Public Schools Channel 76, the Family Community Engagement Internet channel. Educate yourself, become an informed voter, and get out there and vote. Whether it's rain, whether it's storming, whether you have something to do, it's very important. Like Reverend Clayton said, this is your investment into the future of not only your children, but children and folk that will come way after you've done your stay here. So thank you for listening in, thank you for coming out, and have a great day. Oh, and join your parent-teacher organization at your school. One of the great ways to network with parents and show your collaborative strength and get some great knowledge is to join your local PTO. Let's parents come together to join with others to make this a better school district. It's going to be a hard way to go. And it starts right in your good old-fashioned Patterson parent-teacher organization. So again, thank you for coming out. Thank you for listening in, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good job. Thank you, Doctor, for coming out. Great. Good. Let's do this again.